floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. As you can see, I've chosen the motto from music for several reasons. You will find out in a minute by listening to my presentation, and also by trying to give tribute to a subject area which seems to get into the background more and more, the arts, music, etc., because of testing. And we are talking about education, which is not that easily to be measured, as we all know. So I invite you to share with me some ideas I've been working on academically, professionally, and on the government's level as an advisor to our ministry and other ministries. Why I've chosen the title Leading Towards the Emerging Future is something I have learned from my personal experience, both locally, nationally, and globally. We need visions to look into the future, but the thing is, the here and now always starts in the here and now situation. And if we are not sensitive and aware of what we are doing right now as far as putting the right direction from the here and now, we run into trouble. You'll find out in a minute. And I'm basing my work on a German sociologist, Niklas Luhmann, who is one of the sociologists who looked at whole systems at all. And he said, a system can only see what it can see. It cannot see what it can't see. Moreover, nor can it see that it cannot see that it can't see. So we are really treading on difficult grounds, because what we can see is not the problem. We have all the goals, objectives, but we don't know what's happening underneath. And if we look at the big picture of society between yesterday, tomorrow, it always starts today. So if we get a new individual into society, he or she always is confronted with this tension of the past and the future. And it is our task in school, and particularly, of course, as leaders in leadership, to balance this delicate process between the past and school. From the past is a place of reproduction, but at the same time, looking into the future, it is a place of transformation. And this is the most difficult thing every teacher has to confront every day. Do we do creative writing and then come down with a red pen and tell them you have to use the right words to pass the test? And this field of tension is what leadership is all about. And it's three dimensions, three issues which matter in schooling. Qualification, this is the main task where the testing takes place. Socialization, how do we get new members into society, or how do we get young people into our society? And last but not least, subjectification. How can each individual grow into more than what is expected of we always have to get people to further than we can expect them or expect themselves. And this is a high challenge. Now, thinking of blind spots, looking at the last year, 2012, Syntagma Square, Greek police fired tear gas at Buddhist youth. Madrid, May this year, students protesting against government austerity measures. We had in the past lots of people trying to provide the best for the future, and we notice where we end up with a generation at risk. These two countries where the demonstrators were on the road are the highest in youth unemployment in Europe right now. So how can we really tackle this challenge and look at it from a more global perspective? We get into the phase where have the first European young people who were born into the European Union, which is a new chance, which is a new developmental phase. And therefore, Europe's youth often is called the lost generation, but despite the frustration and worries about the future, the young ones are the ones with the most positive attitude towards the EU. I think this is very remarkable and we have to be careful about. And nevertheless, it unites young people in their belief in the European project, which has been part of their life since birth. When we look at what is important for people, and look at the Gallup study, which was done across 150 countries, then what people think is most important for them to have is a good job. Can we provide that to them? And it's more important than peace, than freedom, than democracy, than a family, than God, and belonging. If that is the case, what really moves people, then we have to think about that from schooling and in society at large. In the German Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which is one of the most prestigious papers, Sebastian Thrun, he was a former Google mastermind, said approximately 65% of all students starting school this year will have jobs which do not even exist today. Our understanding of schooling will have to change dramatically. Learning and education will become a permanent process as challenges in the workforce are dramatically increasing. And we have to be aware of that and not pretend as if we knew what the jobs of these young people will be in the future. This is why I want to stress this emerging future to be sensitive and become sensitive. Andreas Schleicher from the OECD keeps telling us about the skills which have become the currency of the 21st century. Skills change lives, he says, because skills have an increasing impact on labor market outcomes and social participation. And he shows by means of this graph how the demand for skills has changed. For example, if we look, and they looked at this in this study from routine and not routine tasks which were asked in professional life. And if we look at the different strands we have there, the highest one is the one, the dark blue, which is non-routine interactive skills. Non-routine interactive skills. And what is down at the bottom, black is non-routine manual, and red is routine cognitive. And the red is the kind of things that are easy to test and teach, and they are disappearing the fastest. So we should be very careful and not project from the testing results to the future if those test the skills which are decreasing most of all the skills needed. And I think this is a high challenge for leadership as well. So skills drive economies, Andreas Schleicher says, because failure to ensure a good skills match has both short-term consequence, skill shortages, and longer-term effects on economic growth and equality of opportunities. John Hattie, one of the most discussed educationalists from New Zealand who works in Australia, has published this book, Visible Learning, and it's remarkable because he's drawn on 800 meta-analyses available across the world and has done a meta-analysis of those 800. And he asks, after all these studies he has looked at, why can't they change? Meaning teachers, policymakers, teacher educators, and oftentimes parents. Meaning us. Why can't we change? And I'm quoting him from his Visible Learning, this requires an openness and a willingness to seek a better alternative to what the teacher is currently doing. Adopting any innovations means discontinuing the use of familiar learning. And where does the discontinuing start? In the here and now, in the emerging future. I'm using 2 slides to sensitize to these aspects, namely, why can't they change? One is a very personal, which we all know psychologically. Here, at the bottom it says, if we don't reach the points soon, we'll be lost. We always wait for somebody to do something to change things for us. So this is the way we've been socialized. Teachers have told students what the right way is to do, but they very rarely learn how to act themselves. And we talk about agency here. And when we talk about agency, I look at the World Happiness Report, commissioned, the first one commissioned by the UN last year. And Amartya Sen, one of the foremost professors dealing with these issues from the MIT, refers to this: achieving a life one values and has reasons to value. This is this kind of agency we are aiming for, which indicates that we have to participate in social and economic life. We have to take ownership of our lives and life conditions, and matters of self-efficacy play an important role here. So agency is one important thing we have to think of when we talk about leadership, and leadership in the classroom, and of course leadership in the whole national system. Amartya Sen, whom I mentioned, says, an agent is someone who acts and brings about change, whose achievement can be evaluated in terms of his or her own values and objectives. And the British sociologist Anthony Giddens says the ability of human beings to act, and the acting itself realized by individual. I mean, those who learn to do Latin know agens is what keeps me moving, what makes me act from a position of ownership. The second slide, referring also to the railway business, is that the structures never work the way we want to have them anymore. And when I do professional workshops with school leaders, they say, it would be very easy to lead the school if not always the ministry came with new things in there, or this would not happen. They very often think they would find the ideal situation, that all things would match, everything would be aligned in a proper way. No, what they have to be confronted is that things can't match anymore, because we are in a society which is so complex, as the commissioner pointed out in her first presentation this morning. And this is quite a challenge for a mindset if we get through a school system where you think everything is neatly done in a proper way. So if we look at the Better Life Index of the OECD, we find all the challenges we have which make it so difficult to get the structures done in a very positive way to act on in a forward direction. It's dealing with inequalities, equity in particular, the social capital, resilience, questions of civic co-creation, and the plurality. And I've been involved myself in a project. If you just look at these 6 aspects, how to tackle these in a global enterprise is something where it's not possible for a single leader to deal with that. We need shared leadership, as we've heard this morning already from the political perspective. Now, if we look at those 2 slides together, agency and structure, Gideon says, we always have to link agency with structure. That means you can't just solve a problem structurally. For example, our minister has introduced a maximum class size of 25 students. So that's a structural intervention. But this does not automatically change teaching in that classroom, which would be nice. Yeah? It's quite a challenge to give the teachers now better opportunities, but it needs the agency to make use of that structural change. And Giddens argues that they are so intertwined that agency influences structure and structure influences agency. And we always have to think them together. Otherwise, we can put lots of new laws. The laws themselves structurally don't change. introducing standards doesn't change the teaching as such. That what we learn is that people learn how to deal with standards in a proper way, but to understand what's behind it. I think these are some of the fallacies I keep encountering in several countries where we haven't got this notion of getting agency and structure balanced in a proper way. The commissioner this morning was talking about management and leadership, and I think this is a very important thing. If we don't differentiate, we might not be able to see how we can deal with the emerging future. A colleague at our business school came up with this nice metaphor of the yin-yang system, because it's neither nor. We need both management and leadership, and it's not a clear-cut order between them. Let me go through them just to sensitize ourselves what it means. And it's not one is good and one is bad. We have to need both. So management will be, if there's a problem, we have to solve it creatively. Leadership would mean to discover new possibilities with the capacity to realize them or make them realized. That means we have to invent something new, that those problems we have to deal with management-wise won't appear anymore. So it's looking further into the future. Management will be working within a paradigm. Now we are in a paradigm of evidence-based governance. You find that everywhere in hospitals, in the police system, in all the civic servant systems going on. Yeah? And we live in that, and we have to. But leadership means creating a new paradigm, thinking ahead, what will come afterwards. So leadership would mean not just prepare our students best for testing for the PISA test, but also to be aware of what comes after PISA. And if it's not us as educationalists taking the next paradigm, taking responsibility for that, somebody else might do it, economy or other parts of society. And I don't think that's a good idea. Management is working within the system. We are all part of a state system and have to work in that. But leadership is working on the system. If the structures never match properly, then we have to expand the system. We have to work on and see how we can make the system better work for student achievement, for example. Management means getting things and people into motion, methods, techniques, everything you learn when you do a management seminar, which are the case in most of the countries now anyway. But leadership is enticing and empowering staff to achieve top performances, getting out most of what you can by the people who are there, whom you lead. In management, the human being is a support, because without leaders, you won't have followers. And leadership means you have to have the dignity for the human being. You have to trust, because it won't work to use human beings as a support in an institution of mistrust. So you see how balanced management and leadership have to be leveled out. Then management as the attitude of doing, because things have to be done. If a problem arises, a decision has to be taken right away. But leadership has the attitude of serving. That's why we talk about servant leadership. You have to serve everybody to get the best position to work on in the future. I want to come back to the metaphor of music, and Nicholas Harnoncourt, an Austrian very famous conductor, he said, I need the creativity of each and every musician, and even if it differs from my own view, I have 80 or 100 musicians in front of me, and each one of them has his or her own opinion. And it is my job to channel this and give it the appropriate direction. It makes absolutely no sense to try and force or dictate. David Afkem, a German conductor who will be the chief conductor of the Spanish National orchestra from next year onward. He said conducting means letting things emerge. You can't press them out from somewhere. You have to let them emerge. And it's something we have to think of as far as development is concerned. We very often try to get from good practice to next practice, and we have to invest a lot to just achieve a little bit of success. That's why leadership is very important, because we want to get on to next practice. And we have to have a kind of creative intervention, like Harnoncourt intervened. And I don't know whether you noticed, it didn't use a conductor's stick. So we don't need all the insignia of a leader. It's more working it with your capacity, with everything you have, and not what somebody thinks should be important, because that's the first thing he gave away. He said, I don't get better practice by using my stick in a better way. So if we want to have a theory on the emerging future, I have learned from Klaus Otto Schama from the MIT, who developed his theory U, which I want to share with you in a couple of short steps. He says, when we start working, we just download the patterns of the past. Because, remember the first slide, the past has made us able to react the way we do. But it's like a computer. It just starts working, and we have to interrupt that. And this is where the U comes in by means of this graph here. And he says, we have to suspend what we are doing, become aware of that, and see things with fresh eyes. We have to open our mind. If we don't open our mind, we can't really let new things in. We can't see things in a different way. That's the first step. Look at it from a different perspective. The second one is you have to open your heart. You have to feel, you have to sense what is happening in the here and now. For me, it's important to sense, where are you now? Otherwise, I can't reach you there. And the third one is open will, letting things go. And that's the most difficult, to let go what you have learned, where you have appreciated, where you have appreciated it to work, where you have been successful. So it's these three aspects our ministry always brings in when she works and wants to put some innovation into the system. She asks her people in the ministry, do you actually, is it your willingness to do it, or is it just you have to do it because this is a policy borrowing from somewhere else? Otherwise you can't have ownership of it. And then Klaus Otto Schama calls this the phase of presencing. This is this word of connecting, sensing the presence. This is where the future starts. We have to sense when you get a new policy into the system. We have to sense when we meet with the teachers. As a teacher, you have to sense what you are doing down there. And you have to ask your general question, what is myself and what is my work? I'm not going up the other end. I just want to point out, we have to become aware of the patterns of the past and see what it means for the emerging future. And I want just quickly to lead you through what we have experienced in Austria with the school-wide change in school leadership by introducing the National Leadership Academy. Lesson 1, work with the whole system. If you just work with small subparts of the system, they rarely connect up to the whole. It's like if you go to a demonstration and only 20 people are there, you better go back home because you don't have an effect, not an influence, no energy in there. So we work with about 250 and 300 school heads at the same time, because then you get the feeling there is the energy of change and you can start feeling the emerging future. Lesson 2, involve all types of schools and all levels of the system. So the previous minister said, we shouldn't just put the school heads in there, we have to put the inspectors there as well and the people from the ministry, because it's only if they are part of this change system that they are aware that this is something where you are a main actor and not just asking somebody else to do it for you. Lesson 3, build networks rather than a new building site. If we just build a new academy structurally, then you have the same situation as you had in the past. You have to find this interactive, and this is why I want to refer to the European Policy Network on School Leadership. The Commissioner touched in her speech as well, because it's the intention of the EU to try to get leadership done and more innovative. So it tries to connect educational research policy in practice on a high-level network with lots of ministries already involved, 10 research institutions, 10 academic institutions, associations, researchers in 22 EU member states, facilitating, stimulating high-level cooperation. And the ongoing activities are researching on policy and practice in school leadership in Europe, setting up national workshops, advertising webinars on school leadership, do peer learning events. There will one in November here in Vilnius for 3 days if you want to participate. Write national reports on key themes like equity, and then do national and European networks. Go to the homepage and find out more to be part of it or join the next webinar coming up shortly. Lesson 6 from the academy, create professional learning communities, so-called PLCs. Bring practitioners and theoreticians together, because otherwise you have a traditional implementation thing, which usually takes years and years. This is, by the way, a picture. When we do those PLCs, professional learning communities, you would have the primary school head together with a school head from a professional upper secondary school. You might have some inspector in that team, and you might even have somebody from the ministry. And they exchanging and working on each other and working towards the future. It's a different way of the emerging future. Lesson 7, use energy, not time, as the currency of high leadership competence, because otherwise you always have the problem of we have no time to do that. Time is not the matter. The energy you need, and then you notice you don't look at the time. Lesson 8, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other, John F. Kennedy once said. So we have to connect leadership with learning. Heinz von Förster, an Austrian, is one of the founders of constructivism, had to leave Austria during the fascist time, as many people from our country, and he said, learning is the most personal thing in the world. It is as unique as a face or a fingerprint, even more individual than one's love life. And if learning is really that intimate, if it's so personal, and thinking of a fingerprint, every human being in the world has a different fingerprint. How different learning biographies must be, how challenging to work at that. Therefore, we have to be mindful of learning. And it is said that there is the longest distance in the world from what is written in a policy paper to what goes on in a young person's head in the classroom, thinking of the past and the future. Yeah. That's why I like the picture on the top left, because there's these two little kids and the books with all the theory in it. They're so close together, but how would that theory be put into those heads for students? So we have to ask, how do we know what and how students learn? If you as a leader, or if you as somebody in the ministry don't know how students learn, don't dare try to teach them. And this is what Hattie again says, what works. If the teacher's lens can be changed to seeing learning through the eyes of students, this would be an excellent beginning. And I want to wind up looking into the past and try to make this the point of the emerging future. This is a picture, it's a bit difficult to see because it's from a newspaper, namely from the New York Times. And what it shows is, it was more than 50 years ago when the first airplanes started becoming more commercialized. some researchers said it would be a good idea to use this airplane for geography lesson because you can experience the world from a very different perspective. But what you see in that airplane, they built up a little classroom with a globe in front of it and teacher pointing at that globe. So, and more than 50 years later, I did an evaluation at an Innsbruck upper secondary school in a so-called laptop class, as you can see. And what I can see, the same arrangement, you have the new technologies, all the lids are down, and I asked the teacher, why don't they open up the computers? That's what they are there for. And he said, well, if I do that, I would lose my student out in the world because they would disappear in the www world. So we see there seems to be some deep structure in education which really causes problems. We always come in with new ideas, but we rarely reach the deep structures. So if we want to see a picture in 50 years' time, we hopefully won't see students sitting in a row, modern technology still dominated in an artificial way. And I believe that this conference can contribute to that a lot. Thank you.